I froze with the envelope in my hand. The dining room went quiet for exactly 1 second, then the laughter started. "You're paying for this," my mother-in-law said, pressing her hand to her chest. "That's adorable, Vivian." Her husband, Gerald, chuckled from the head of the table. My brother-in-law Felix leaned sideways to say something to his wife Norah. Norah covered her mouth. My husband, Joel, looked at his plate. I stood with the envelope, a check I had written that morning, enough to cover the rehearsal dinner for every person in that room, and I smiled. The smile cost me something. It came from a place already running a deficit. My name is Vivian Hayes. I am a financial strategist. I have managed accounts worth more than most people's neighborhoods, and I have been married to Joel Hayes for 3 years. In those 3 years, his family has never once asked what I do for a living. They had decided what I was before they met me. Every dinner since had been a quiet confirmation of their theory. That night, standing in their dining room with a check in my hand and laughter in my ears, I made a decision. They would find out. And I would choose the moment. The dinner that started it all was the planning meeting for Felix and Norah's wedding rehearsal. They had chosen a venue slightly beyond the family's discussed budget. Gerald suggested everyone chip in. I offered to cover it. That was when the laughter happened. To understand why it hurt the way it did, I have to go back further. 3 years of it. Sitting at tables like that one, listening to conversations shift slightly when I walked in. Watching Gerald speak about finance as though I were attending a lecture. Accepting Patricia's cooking advice with the smile I had developed for those moments. Warm enough to be polite, closed enough to hold everything in. Patricia Hayes was Joel's mother. She was 61, elegant in the way of someone who had spent decades making a performance of it. She had decided in our first meeting that I was pleasant but uncomplicated. Something to be managed rather than engaged. I hadn't corrected her. I had smiled. Attended dinners. Brought thoughtful gifts. Listened carefully. And I had noticed everything. Not because I was planning something then. But when you grow up having to prove your worth in every room, noticing becomes a survival skill. The laughter at the rehearsal dinner was not new. It was just louder than usual. What they didn't know was what I actually did. My official title was Senior Portfolio Strategist at a private wealth management firm. I had held that title for 4 years and the role for 7. Before that, I had spent 3 years building a consulting practice from a single client and a dining room table in a studio apartment. I had a talent for numbers, specifically the kind that compounded quietly over time. I understood how wealth was built, not the dramatic kind, not the inheritance kind, but the slow, careful, deliberate kind that didn't make noise until it had to. My own net worth was something I had never mentioned to anyone in Joel's family because no one had asked. In 3 years, not one member of the Hayes family had asked a professional question that wasn't designed to lead to a gentle correction. Gerald once told me, at Thanksgiving, that the key to financial security was owning real estate and avoiding risk. I had smiled and passed the potatoes. I owned 3 properties. I had taken exactly the kinds of risks Gerald would have advised against, at exactly the right moments, and they had returned exactly what I projected. The laughter was built entirely on assumptions. I was about to let them finish building. Joel and I talked that night, after we got home. He was apologetic in the way he sometimes was, not defensive, not dismissive, but careful. He knew his family. He had grown up in it and had developed a particular fluency in managing his own discomfort at their behavior. They didn't mean anything by it, he said. I know they didn't, I said. That was the truth. They weren't laughing from cruelty. They were laughing from certainty, the comfortable certainty of people who have never been surprised by someone they had already categorized. Joel looked at me. You're not upset, he said. I'm thinking, I said. He knew the difference. He had learned, in 3 years, that quiet thinking and hurt silence felt entirely different in a room. What are you thinking about? He asked. The wedding, I said. Felix and Norah's wedding. I'd like to do something for it. He waited. Not the rehearsal dinner, I said. Something bigger. Something they haven't asked me to handle yet. I want to do it well enough that it can't be ignored. Joel was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. He trusted me. That was, genuinely, one of his best qualities. Felix and Norah's wedding was 3 months away. The venue was a restored estate outside the city, beautiful but expensive, with a catering contract not yet finalized. Norah had mentioned twice at family dinners that the catering options within their budget weren't what she had hoped for. I spent a week making calls. I had worked with 2 event management companies through my firm's client hospitality division, and I had a contact at a catering group that did high-end corporate events. I called in a favor, not a large one, but it required credibility to make. 2 weeks after the rehearsal dinner laughter, I sent Norah a message. I told her I had spoken to a catering group I knew professionally, and that they had a cancellation for her wedding weekend. I asked if she would like me to arrange a tasting. She replied in 4 minutes. We went the following Thursday, Norah, Patricia, and me. The food was exceptional. The price was within their budget because the group had offered a preferred rate through my professional relationship. Patricia was quiet through most of the tasting. Walking out, she said, "That was surprisingly good, Vivian." Surprisingly. I smiled. It was the first brick in a wall I had been quietly designing. I want to explain something about how I approached what came next. I was not performing. I was not executing a revenge plan. I was doing something more specific, stopping the performance of smallness. For 3 years, I had made myself easier to dismiss. Not intentionally. It was what happened when I chose peace over confrontation, when I decided dinner table arguments weren't worth my energy. I had let the Hayes family's version of me go unchallenged because I had other things to do. But there is a difference between choosing not to correct someone and allowing an inaccurate picture to calcify into permanent fact. The rehearsal dinner laughter had told me the picture had calcified. So I stopped making myself smaller. Not loudly. Not dramatically. I simply began being exactly what I was. I mentioned my properties when Gerald raised real estate at the next family dinner. I asked Gerald's financial advisor a specific technical question at a cocktail party, the kind that made him pause and respond with attention he hadn't given me before. I hosted a dinner and prepared a meal Norah later described as the best she had eaten outside a restaurant. Small things. Accurate. None performed. The Hayes family was building a corrected picture. They just didn't know it yet. The month before the wedding, I told Joel what I had done. We were in the kitchen on a Sunday morning. He had coffee. I had the folder I had been building, catering confirmation, floral vendor invoice, the coordination list I had been managing with Norah's knowledge. I told him I had been handling a portion of the wedding logistics at no cost to Felix and Norah. I told him the total value of what I had arranged. He set his coffee down. "Vivian," he said. "It's not a significant number for me," I said. "It is for them. I want to do it. Not as a statement. Because Felix is your brother and Norah is genuinely kind and they deserve a good wedding. And because of the rehearsal dinner," he said. "And a little because of the rehearsal dinner," I said. He laughed. "A real one. What does Mom know?" he asked. "She knows I arranged the catering. She doesn't know the rest. I thought it would be better if she found out at the wedding." Joel nodded. "Don't hurt them," he said. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I said. "I'm just done being invisible." He trusted me. That was, always, one of his best qualities. Norah and I had 3 meetings in the 5 weeks before the wedding. I want to describe Norah fairly because she matters here. She was not responsible for the Hayes family dynamic. She had married into it the way I had, with the slight advantage of being closer to their preferred type, quieter, more deferential, but she had her own sharp intelligence and had recognized mine early. We had never spoken about it directly. But in our first planning meeting, she had asked me 2 professional questions that told me she had researched what I did for a living. In our second meeting, she said, "Can I ask how you know the catering group?" I explained my professional role briefly. She was quiet for a moment. "Joel's family doesn't talk about your work," she said. "Not accusatory, observational. They don't tend to ask," I said. She nodded with the nod of a woman who understood being seen partially. "I ask," she said. "I know," I said. "That's why I'm telling you." We hadn't discussed the Hayes family since. But Norah knew more about what I had arranged than Patricia did, and she had said simply, "Thank you. This is more than you needed to do." "It's exactly what I wanted to do," I said. 2 weeks before the wedding, Gerald called me. This was unusual. Gerald and I had a dinner table relationship. I existed for him primarily as a setting detail in scenes he was otherwise directing. He called on a Tuesday afternoon. "Vivian," he said. "I wanted to talk about the rehearsal dinner situation." "Of course," I said. "I hope you didn't take it the wrong way," he said. "Patricia and I weren't trying to make you uncomfortable. We just—" "It's fine, Gerald," I said. A pause. "We know you and Joel manage things carefully," he said. "We didn't want you to stretch yourselves." I understood exactly what he was saying. He was being kind in the way he knew how, which was still condescending but not intentionally cruel. He was reassuring me that their laughter had been protective. He believed this. "I appreciate that," I said. "I genuinely don't hold it against you." That was true. "We're glad you and Joel are coming to the wedding," he said. "It'll be a good day." "It's going to be a wonderful day," I said. "I think Felix and Norah will be very happy with how it comes together." Gerald said he hoped so. I knew so. The wedding day arrived on a Saturday in September. The estate was exactly as beautiful as the photographs. Stone walls. Old trees. A courtyard that caught the afternoon light the way I had hoped when I reviewed the floor plan with the events coordinator 3 weeks earlier. Joel and I arrived an hour before the other family members. He straightened his jacket in the car mirror and said, without looking at me, "You nervous?" "No," I said. "Good," he said. He reached over and took my hand briefly. Then he opened the door. The courtyard was ready. The florals were better than the renderings, a vendor I had sourced through my firm's event contacts at a price the family didn't know I had negotiated. The catering staff moved with the efficiency of people who had done this many times before. When Patricia arrived and walked into the courtyard, she stopped. She looked around at the flowers, the tables, the light coming through the old trees. "This is beautiful," she said to no one in particular. Joel looked at me. I smiled and went to greet the arriving guests. I did not need her to know yet. The evening would handle that on its own. The ceremony was exactly what Felix and Norah had wanted. Small, focused, unhurried. The officiant's words were warm and specific, the kind of ceremony that felt written for 2 people rather than assembled from a template. I sat in the 3rd row beside Joel's cousin Petra, who worked in landscape architecture and had been, over 3 years of family gatherings, the person I most naturally spoke with at tables where I was otherwise carefully managed. Petra leaned close during the reception arrival and said quietly, "The courtyard is extraordinary. Did someone hire a new planner?" "I coordinated some of it," I said. She turned to look at me. "You arranged this?" "Parts of it. With Norah's input." "Vivian," she said, "do you know how much something like this usually costs?" "Yes," I said. "I do." She looked at me for a moment with the recalibration I was becoming familiar with from this family. "I feel like I should have asked you more questions," she said. "There's time," I said. The reception began, and the evening unfolded the way I had anticipated. Beautifully, specifically, without a single visible seam in any detail I had touched. Petra spent the rest of the cocktail hour asking me questions. It was, I thought, a good beginning. The dinner was where everything shifted. Not in a dramatic way. In the quiet, specific way that truth arrives when the conditions for it have been carefully prepared. Felix stood to make a toast. He thanked his parents. He thanked Norah's family. He paused, and then said something I had not asked him to say and had not expected. "I also want to thank Vivian," he said. Patricia looked up from her glass. "Norah told me what Vivian arranged for tonight," Felix said. "The catering. The florals. The coordination that made tonight look the way it does." He looked at me. "I honestly had no idea how much you'd done until Norah told me. So, thank you. Genuinely." He raised his glass. The table raised theirs. Patricia was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not warmth, not yet. Something more preliminary than warmth. The expression that arrives before warmth when a person realizes they have been looking at something incorrectly for a long time. I raised my glass. I didn't make a speech. I smiled at Felix and Norah and let the moment be theirs. That was the right choice. The moment didn't need me to fill it. After the toast, Gerald came to find me. I was near the edge of the courtyard watching the dancing. The light was golden at that hour. Gerald approached carefully, the approach of a man who has realized he doesn't have all the information he thought he had. "Vivian," he said. "Gerald," I said. "Felix's toast," he said. "I didn't know you had arranged all of this." "I didn't want to make it a thing," I said. Norah needed help with a few elements. I had the right contacts. "From your work?" he asked. "Yes," I said. A pause. "Joel's never really told us much about what you do," he said. "Joel is private about our life," I said. "I appreciate that about him." Gerald looked at the courtyard. At the florals I had sourced. At the catering staff whose work I had coordinated. At a wedding that had exceeded the family's budget by a significant margin. "What do you do, Vivian?" he asked. Simply. Like a man who had thought he knew the answer to a question and had just discovered he'd never asked it. I told him. Not to wound him. I described my work, my role, and what I had built over 7 years. He was quiet for a long time after that. Patricia found me an hour later. The dancing was still going. Joel was on the floor with Petra, both of them laughing. Felix and Norah moved slowly near the center. The evening had the quality of something that would be remembered warmly for a long time. Patricia came to the edge of the crowd where I was standing. She was holding her glass in both hands, which I had never seen her do. Her usual posture was contained and deliberate. The two-handed grip was, for Patricia, a visible tell. "Felix told me more," she said. "About what you arranged." "It was for Norah and Felix," I said. "I wanted it to be a good day for them." "It is," she said. "It's more than a good day." A pause. "The catering alone." "Please don't worry about the catering," I said. She looked at me. "We laughed at you," she said. "At the planning dinner. When you offered to pay." "Yes," I said. "We assumed," she said. "I know," I said. "We didn't ask," she said. "About your work. About what we never asked." "No," I said. The word was not an accusation. It was simply accurate. Patricia looked at the courtyard her daughter-in-law's wedding had become. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I want to describe that moment honestly. Patricia Hayes had been making me smaller for 3 years, through cooking corrections and raised eyebrows and the specific laughter that erupts when someone says something confirming an assumption already held. She was standing in front of me, both hands on her wine glass, saying she owed me an apology. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired, the way you feel after carrying something heavy and finally being allowed to set it down. A small sadness that it had taken 3 years and a wedding to arrive here. "I don't need an apology," I said. I meant it. What I needed was accuracy. The Hayes family's understanding of me was becoming accurate. That was what mattered. "I want to give you one anyway," Patricia said. I looked at her. For the first time, she was entirely present in a conversation with me. Not managing. Just there. "All right," I said. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't see you. I should have asked." "Yes," I said. "You should have." We stood in the gold evening light. "Then, there's a dessert from a bakery in Milan. I think you'll like it." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "I would like that very much," she said. Joel found me later, near the end of the evening. The dancing had slowed. The candles were burning low. Norah sat with her head on Felix's shoulder, and they looked exactly as happy as 2 people should look at the end of their wedding day. Joel came up beside me. "Dad talked to me," he said. "I figured he would," I said. "He said you told him about your work." He asked. It seemed like the right moment to answer. Joel put his arm around my shoulders. We stood looking at the courtyard. "He was embarrassed," Joel said. "I know. I didn't want him to be. But it was necessary." Mom talked to me too, he said. She said you were gracious when she apologized. I wasn't performing grace, I said. I don't want them to feel terrible. I just needed them to know the truth. Joel was quiet. I should have said more, he said. When they dismissed you, I should have pushed back. Yes, I said. You should have. He nodded. I will, he said. We stood in the courtyard as the evening wound down, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt the weight of the Hayes family as something manageable rather than something I was carrying alone. In the weeks after the wedding, the shift was gradual. Not dramatic. People are not renovated in a single evening. They adjust, test new positions, sometimes revert before finding new ones. I knew this professionally and personally. Gerald called me the following Tuesday. He had a question about an investment his broker had suggested. A specific, technical question. He asked it carefully, as a man asking something of someone he now understood to be qualified. I answered it. Also carefully. We talked for 20 minutes. He asked 2 follow-up questions. By the end of the call he had reached a conclusion that was, in my professional opinion, the correct one. Thank you, Vivian, he said before we hung up. Not the careful thank you of someone managing an interaction. The direct thank you of a person who received something useful. Anytime, I said. Patricia sent me a recipe 3 days after the wedding. A dish she had been making for decades, handwritten on a card, with a note that said, I thought you might enjoy this. It's more technical than it looks. I read that last sentence several times. More technical than it looks. From Patricia, that was a considerable compliment. I wrote her a thank you and told her I would make it that weekend. Felix and Norah came to dinner at our house the month after the wedding. They had asked, which was new. Previously, family dinners were organized by Patricia and Gerald, and attendance was expected rather than invited. Felix called Joel directly. I cooked. Norah sat on a stool at the kitchen counter while I finished the sauce, and we talked, properly talked, about work and money and the specific challenges of being women in rooms not designed with them in mind. Felix and Joel were in the living room, apparently debating something about architecture. Can I ask you something? Norah said. Yes, I said. The wedding, she said. What you arranged. Why didn't you tell them earlier? Patricia and Gerald. You could have, it would have stopped a lot of the dismissiveness sooner. I stirred the sauce. Because I wasn't ready, I said. And because I needed to know, when I finally did it, that it was about being seen accurately, not about winning. She considered this. That's a very patient way to live, she said. It was, I said. I'm not sure I'd do it exactly the same way again. She smiled. I think I would have snapped much earlier, she said. You would have been right to, I said. I should say something about Joel, because he deserves more than a supporting role in this account. Joel Hayes was, during his family's dismissiveness, not a passive bystander. He was a man caught between love for his family and love for his wife, navigating something that required more from him than he had initially known how to give. He had not been perfect. He had looked at his plate at the rehearsal dinner. He had said they didn't mean anything by it too many times. But he had consistently trusted me. He had not pressured me to make myself smaller. That was my own choice. And when I told him what I was planning, he said okay with the simple confidence of a man who believed in his wife. After the wedding, I watched him change. He pushed back at the next family dinner when Gerald made an old comment about Joel and me managing carefully. Joel interrupted, gently but clearly, actually, Vivian manages exceptionally well. The table shifted. I looked at him. He looked back with the expression of a man practicing something new and finding it fit. I reached over and put my hand on his. Small things. But the large changes are always assembled from small ones, and what he was practicing was worth practicing. A document arrived in November. I had not planned it as a document. It had started as a personal accounting, the kind I did periodically for my own financial records, and had gradually become something more detailed. It listed every financial contribution I had made to the Hayes family over 3 years. Not Joel's contributions. Mine, specifically. The catering and florals and wedding coordination. But also, The property tax situation I had resolved for Gerald in year one using contacts from my firm. An investment correction I had made on Joel's behalf when his parents had advised him into a position I immediately recognized as problematic. A tuition contribution toward Felix's professional certification course, which Felix had believed came from a family scholarship fund. Felix had not known that fund needed supplementing. Gerald and Patricia had asked Joel quietly, and Joel had asked me. The total was larger than anyone in the family except Joel had known. I did not send the document to anyone. I showed it to Joel, then filed it in my personal records. The point was never to present it. The point was to know it, to have the clear, documented truth of what I had contributed to a family that had found me adorable. Knowing it was enough. Christmas that year was at our house. I had suggested it in October. Patricia agreed quickly. Perhaps she was looking for a gesture, and accepting my invitation was one she could make without constructing it. I planned the menu carefully. Not to impress. I was past that phase. I planned it the way I planned everything, with attention to what would make the day genuinely good. Gerald arrived with a bottle of wine he had selected with unusual care. He handed it to me and said, "I asked the sommelier. He said you'd know what it was." I looked at the label. "I do," I said. "It's excellent. Thank you." He nodded with the satisfaction of a man who had done his research. Patricia kissed my cheek, something she had not done before, and said, "What can I help with?" Not, "What are you making?" Just, "What can I help with?" I gave her a task. She did it without comment. Felix and Norah arrived with a dish Norah had made following a method I had mentioned at our dinner. It was good. I told her so. We sat at a table I had set, in a house I owned, with a family learning to look at me. Slowly. Imperfectly. Genuinely. There is a version of this story that ends at the wedding. The check is written, the toast is made, the laughter is replaced by silence, and the silence is the victory. Clean and final. That is not the story I lived. The story I lived continued into ordinary weeks, a call from Gerald on a Wednesday about a bond fund, a text from Patricia about a recipe she had adapted, a dinner with Felix and Norah where nobody mentioned the wedding at all because there was too much new material in the present to revisit the past. The dismissiveness did not vanish. It reduced. Occasionally it surfaced in old patterns, and each time it did, I named it, quietly, without accusation, in the way that makes inaccuracy uncomfortable rather than dramatic. It was not a transformation. It was a correction. That was what I had wanted. Not to transform them into different people. To correct the inaccurate picture they had been holding of me. To make the truth visible enough that continuing to ignore it required active effort. They had stopped making that effort. Which meant, simply, that they had started seeing me. Not perfectly. Not completely. But accurately. That was all I had ever needed it to be. In January, Patricia asked me to lunch. Just the two of us. A restaurant she liked, midweek. She was already seated when I arrived, which told me she had thought carefully and wanted to be there first. We ordered. We talked easily about ordinary things, her garden, a renovation she and Gerald were considering, a book she had read. Then she set her fork down. "I've been thinking about the years," she said. "Which years?" I asked. "Since you and Joel married," she said. "The way I spoke to you. The way I treated your contributions." "Patricia," I said. "No. Let me say it." A pause. I was unkind. Not intentionally. I thought I was being realistic, which is somehow worse. I had a story about you. A very small story. I never checked if it was accurate. "No," I said. "I'm sorry," she said. The apology at the wedding was a beginning. I want this to be the full thing. I sat with it for a moment. "I accept it," I said. Genuinely. She nodded. We finished our lunch, and by the time we walked out into the January afternoon, the air between us was different. It was, I thought, a reasonable place to start. Spring arrived, and with it a clarity I had not expected to feel so completely. The Hayes family was not transformed. Gerald still had opinions. Patricia still had preferences. Felix was still charming in the easy way of youngest children who never had to try very hard. But something essential had changed. I walked into their house with the ease of someone who knows her own worth and doesn't need the room to confirm it first. I spoke at dinner tables with more precision. When I disagreed with Gerald, I said so calmly and with specific reasoning, and Gerald, adjusting, practicing, listened. Norah and I met for lunch once a month. Joel and I were becoming the kind of couple that difficulty makes stronger. I hosted another family gathering in April. Patricia arrived with a dish made from my recipe suggestion. It was good. I told her so without qualifying it. She thanked me without deflecting. I thought about the envelope at the rehearsal dinner, the check, the laughter, the smile that had cost me something. What that moment set in motion was not revenge. Not a lesson. Just the slow, deliberate work of becoming visible in a room that had decided not to look. I had done that work. It was worth every patient step. My name is Vivian Hayes. I am a senior portfolio strategist. I own 3 properties. Investments performing precisely as I projected. I have contributed to a family in ways neither seen nor acknowledged until I chose the moment for truth to arrive. I am not telling this story to be admired. I am telling it because I know there are people who recognize the smile I wore at that rehearsal dinner. The one that holds everything in while the room laughs at something they decided about you before you had a chance to speak. What I know now, that I did not fully know then, is this. The moment to stop wearing that smile is not when someone finally asks. It is when you decide the accurate version of yourself deserves to be in the room, not because anyone has earned the right to see it, but because you have. The Hayes family laughed at an envelope. I had already built the life that envelope came from. I would keep building it. The only thing that changed was whether they got to know. I chose to let them know. Slowly. Precisely. With patience that was not passive but deliberate. When the laughter stopped, what replaced it was not silence. It was attention. That was enough. That was everything.